Alrighty, so welcome everyone to another governance call. This is a special governance call. It's going to be the governance working group call, the first of hopefully many to come while we try to figure out what governance 2.0 would look like on Celo. So yeah, with that we can get started. Before we get started, I want to show you one of our talented designers created this governance call, kind of image, and I love it. I think it's great. We have an agenda. Before the agenda, or I believe you wanted to say something about the Celo blockchain. If you want to give it a shout out.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm sure many of you are aware that we're planning a hard fork soon. So this is just a heads up that we're planning to release the version for Baklava next week, I think on Wednesday. It'll be basically 1.3.0 beta, and it'll have the hard fork activation block set for Baklava, and it would be set for 12 days after that, so 2 weeks from Monday. So you'll have like 12 days to upgrade on Baklava, but we figured it's better to give us a heads up that this is coming.
Thank you. And for anyone, like, if you're worried about, like, catching that information later and stuff, I'm going to be emailing it to everyone, adding it on our Discord and stuff. And if you're signed up to the Celo Signal mailing list, you'll get it in the email as one of the heads up. Let me pull up. I think my screen sharing is paused. Oh, I see why. Okay, can you see the screen now? Okay. Sorry about that. I was just moving the screen around. I don't know what happened. So let me just put a link here to Celo Signal. So if you haven't signed up to that, I recommend you do, because that's where you're going to find all the information on governance, validators, hard forks, even happy hours sometimes, but like anything relating to the core community, you'll be able to find it here. All right, so now let's get started and go over the governance call. I'm going to go over some tensions first in the agenda, because I collected tension from talking to different people and stuff. And what I would like to do is we can talk about these tensions, and then we can start with I have like an open public Google Doc that we can start working with together. So yeah, we'll get started. So I think the initial part of having this call is multiple factor. I had some personal tension that I thought like the governance process isn't fully specified when compared to the CIP process. And given the latest round of governance proposals that were submitted, some of them were also underspecified and stuff like that. So I thought, I was, the tension was shared by other members of the community, not necessarily in CLab, but, outside of CLab, which is encouraging to see. And because of that, I felt it was a good opportunity right now to start going over the governance process as it is and going over the tension that we feel and what would proposals and ideas look like. So with that, let's get started. So the first tension we had was the governance and the Cgp process are not as specified as the CIP process. Now, if you go to the CIP process that we have, CIP-0000, I know it's like a really annoying name for it, but like that one is really well specified. We have potentially planned to even, make it simpler just because of how well it's specified and how much specification there is. But we want to do something that is borderline specified at least. And the example that I'd like to give is Cosmos. So if you go to Cosmos governance GitHub, it's linked to the agenda. It's really nicely specified for how do you best practice it for drafting a proposal. Cosmos on-chain governance overview. They even have specific categories of governance proposals. Like if a governance proposal is about how do I change a parameter? If I want to change only a parameter and stuff, how do you propose that? And it only concerns with parameter changes, among other things. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that as maybe part of your homework and stuff, and something that we can take an advantage of at Celo. But this is like one of the tension. The other tension that I think is, at the very least, we need to think about together is there's an inconsistency currently when you have a CGP number that we refer to. And then when you submit it on chain, it has a different ID, which is what we call a proposal ID. And then to make matters even worse, if that CGP number is referencing a CIP, that CIP also has a different number, right? So you're gonna have potentially 3 different numbers to track down, and it can be really confusing. So I'm hoping at the very least we can talk about ideas for that. So CGPs with missing sections or underspecified. I think for this one, what would help is if we can have a process where if there's a CGP being submitted on chain, we need to at least maybe have some sort of committee or like editors like asynchronously giving the thumbs up before it gets submitted, because then they would say, okay, we're seeing this as it's like, you know, the missing sections are completed. That means it's good to go for submission. And ideally, you know, the editors would be people that are not necessarily part of CLAG, but part of the community. Currently, I'm the only editor. And like, because I have other responsibilities and stuff, I might not do the best job if all the governance process, editing and proposals falls down on me. So which brings me to the next point, we need more CGP editors, right? And I'm hoping at least with this call, we can talk about that and see all the different editors. Feel free to stop me anytime if you have questions or stuff, or if there's anything else you wanted to add for each points. And you know, like we're doing this together, right? It's a working group. So governable parameters, I think we talked about it in the Cosmos example. It might be something that we also want to track down to the CIP process. So in the CIP process currently, what's the CIP process? The CIP process is how do you specify improvements to the Celo blockchain as a protocol? And what does that mean is like any kind of changes that would either improve Celo as a whole or something needs to be tracked down in a proposal, right? And how is that different than governance? Governance proposals are the only reason you do governance proposals is if we want to submit governance on chain to modify a parameter and stuff. And those modifications can be part of a CIP proposal and stuff. But governance is just a different mechanic than just CIP in general, just because it requires voting and on chain, and there's a whole process around that. And this is what we're here for. But you know, CIP process can have things that have nothing to do with governance. Like the hard fork is a good example. Anytime you do any modification on the blockchain, you'd need to coordinate on a hard fork and stuff, and that has nothing to do with governance per se. But the point here is if we're modifying a value by governance, that value, that new parameter value that we're submitting, if it gets passed, we need to somehow track it in the CIP process. And the reason for that is we don't want to modify like we want to track down the most up-to-date values, and you know that way that informs the CIP process as well better and stuff like that. One tension we also had was
yeah, sorry.
Sorry. So one other process thing we had is coordination with approvers needs a more specified verification process. So part of the governance process, and more folks can add info if needed. Part of the governance process involved having an approval stage, and that approval stage requires 3 out of 9 multi-sigs that are coordinated, like, you know, have connection either with the foundation or just like independent members. 3 out of 9 multi-sig owners would have to approve the proposals, like the governance proposals, before they get, you know, sent for the referendum stage. Referendum stage is where we start voting. The other things that we have is there's an issue around Celo CLI governance view. That one we can create tickets for if needed. We need to document the proposal code verification procedure. I believe, Volte, I don't know if you're the one who wrote this, but I think, you know, it definitely makes sense. Nelson, okay. Never post proposal until they're fully specified, including code verification procedures. The other context is more about making it reasonably easy to be standalone and having all the necessary information for that each proposal, so that when you're reading that proposal, you understand what it's going to do, right? and also proactively seek community input on proposals before they're posted. Currently, this is what the governance call is for. When we have different proposals and stuff, we do like governance calls. But if there's any way that we want to improve it and stuff, I think this is what the call is for. And then audit report, make sure we publicize audit reports prior to submission of like the governance proposals. The other thing, the final thing that is maybe we can move governance out of the CIP process just because each one has a separate process and it makes sense to each one has its own separate repository and stuff like that. And it just makes it easier to coordinate with different editors because something like when you look at GitHub editor permissions, like the CIP or CIP editors might have the same equal permission to the CGP editor, but they're focused on two different things. So because of that kind of inconsistency, I think it's better to decouple it and stuff. So yeah, solution, we also have like one of the proposals and ideas, Amy had a doc about what does the governance 2.0 look like. And we can definitely go over this doc. Feel free to check it out and stuff. We can go over it in detail later in this call. But yeah, I wanted to stop right here and see if there's any feedback and stuff before we can, get started and stuff. So yeah, the floor is yours.
And I'll just add that the governance 2.0 is mostly around very technical solutions, so less of the process-oriented stuff. This is something we've been collecting for probably the last year, but open to the community to add ideas around there. But I think what Yaz is also trying to establish is more of the process portion as well.
Yeah, exactly. So the process portion, and if there's like the technical process as part of that, I think that's super complementary, and we should definitely specify as part of a governance 2.0. But yeah, like the mix of both worlds would be really ideal. So any more feedback? Anyone has any thoughts, any idea? Does this make sense? Is there any tension we haven't captured that you think would be an improvement if we talk about it within this call?
Hey guys, Mike from Polychain Labs here. First of all, I think it's a great list. And Amy, I just saw the first time these governance 2.0 ideas. I'm going through them. A lot of these look pretty good. For instance, I'm looking at the soft governance and off-chain voting one. I think that's a really good idea, something we could borrow that's kind of lightweight that could be easily put into the process. The only other thing that I might add that I thought of fairly recently that would perhaps be good for the list. I've been on, I think, 3 of the all-core dev calls now to discuss governance. And one thing that I really I've really enjoyed is I think the discussion has always been really well informed and really productive and really inclusive. Perhaps thinking of simple changes, perhaps we might want to just consider renaming it something to more consistently calling the governance call or proposal call or something, because I think calling it an all core dev, as it's often called, might be discouraging for people who don't view themselves as core developers, who might just be onlookers, and perhaps they don't feel that it's their place to participate in a call like that. So I figured I would throw that out there as just an additional point.
Yeah, that's a good call out, but I think it might be because the all core dev call focuses more on the CIP process. It doesn't really touch governance unless, like the reason we talked about governance proposals at the last all core dev call, because those governance proposals per se are implementation details of a CIP that we specified together. And the reason it's like called all core dev call is because hypothetically, let's say we have another client team that's building on Celo. It's like an all hands on deck kind of thing, but like, mostly because of the core dev, because the CIP process has to be technical in nature rather than a governance related voting and stuff like that, because we can't really inform the best technical improvement by allowing people to vote on them. The best technical improvement are if we actually do audits, if the engineers together say that this is a technically sound proposal that doesn't really impact the network, which is a different scope than governance proposal, which is like, for example, there's a governance proposal that was for community gifts or for managing an allocation of the community fund. Because this touches on a specific smart contract, it has nothing to do with Celo as a whole, but more with a specific smart contract, which is a great avenue for governance proposals and stuff and for the governance call, but it's out of scope for the all core dev call, which is where you want engineers to just like look at a proposal, be like, does this make sense technically? Is there an attack vector? and stuff like that? And does this improve it? Which is why I do understand the confusion, because we did cover some CGPs in the last all-core dev call, but it was more because, like I said, because they're about CIP 33, which is the Celo Euro, and they're just like going over how do we implement this CIP 33 kind of thing.
Yeah, I do think there's an interesting point that's brought up, which is as we grow the number of Celo owners, right, and we want more participation in governance, should we be thinking of segmenting our audiences and planning an event for the crypto curious, crypto savvy, less technical folks who aren't contributors necessarily to the platform, right, or developers? So maybe I think I know we had initially started thinking about that and we thought it might be too early, but maybe this is a time to do a separate call for these folks and start bringing in the broader community than just a very like niche community that's very involved and very technical. I would assume these are people who are less technical, maybe observing at a distance, like all the people who are in the Telegram channel, for example.
Yeah, I would assume the governance call as it is inclusive of these less technically savvy people, less crypto savvy people. But if they don't feel like if they feel like it's still way out of scope, I think it's a good avenue for us to have like, I don't know what it's called, but maybe like a Celo owner call, like updates on the platform kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's a great thing. So while we're having these discussions, let me just start. Oh, nice. People started filling up information here. Thank you. If you don't have access to the document, I'm going to paste it again here and stuff. And yeah, feel free just to add information. I can't really juggle everything at the same time. But I think one of the points is having not non-technical, but a Celo general community call for non-technical updates on the Celo platform. Okay. Yeah. So so a lot of great points and stuff. Is there anything else you guys want to add for that specific point that we can capture?
Not much. I appreciate the clarification. I'm just looking back at the old ones now for recent all-core dev versus governance, and I think even just a slight tagline that even about the audience would go a long way. I had just presumed that they were kind of interchangeable and didn't notice it for that reason. But this is a really helpful clarification.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, so Asa, thank you, Asa, for writing it down. Okay, so having a clear distinction between the all-core dev and the governance call and potentially general community call would make a lot of sense moving forward. Maybe like, you know, little tagline, maybe we can do helpful explainers later, like maybe like within our documentation or something like that, that would like allow people to know the distinction between all these different community calls that we're gathering together and stuff like that. That's definitely a good call out. Okay, so how do y'all like to proceed? Because we collected a lot of attention, we gone over them briefly. And maybe we can hit them up all item by item and stuff and see how far we go. Or does anyone have a different idea how they want to this working group call to proceed? Like, I'm just a facilitator, but this is for everyone to decide together. So feel free to jump in, tell me what you think would be a good format to move forward.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I think we're going to see like 2 or maybe 3 classes of solution emerge. My hope is that a lot of these tensions can be addressed with process and documentation of that process. And my hope is that'll be like the overwhelming majority, and that should be like actionable very quickly.
Right.
I think there's going to be a second class, which would be addressed by like technical tooling or changes to technical tooling that can be built and deployed relatively easily and without too much risk, that could kind of come in the like medium term. Mm-hmm. And I think the final category of solution, which I think will hopefully there will be very few kind of tensions that whose solution kind of falls into this, is like changes to the like core code itself. the governance, the like on-chain governance process is upgradable, but it's perhaps one of the like riskier or like riskiest things to upgrade and the most complex. And like that is something I think we would want to do very like slowly and deliberately. And so, yeah, as Amy said, like a lot of the kind of feature ideas we were collecting in that doc were related to that, but I wouldn't expect, or I don't think it would be wise to like try to rush anything there.
Gotcha. I just want to capture your points again. So you mentioned three classes as a solution. Documentation and process is one of them. Developer tool, like, or, you know, technical tooling in general for these processes. What would the third one be again?
Changes to like the governance contract itself, like on-chain changes, or like meta governance. And I think my hope is that like this is the order. I think this is both the order of like the ease of which we can make improvements, and also the order at which I think like we will see coverage. Like I'd expect most problems would be solved by the first thing, a bit more by the second, and then like I think at least the list I see, like only a couple of them would require changes to the third thing.
Yeah, no, I love this breakdown. It really helps frame it together. Okay, so what we're going to do here then, having those three classes, let's go over all the tension, unless somebody has, I think Asa, you think it's okay, we go to each tension item by item and we can go from there. Okay, so I'm going to, yeah.
Also, one quick thing I might want to add is I'm curious if we think we can actually get to all these tensions, and if not, should we, like, I don't know if you wanted to do it now or maybe at the end of it, but if you wanted to also think about like laying out a like process for how to address these kind of tensions going forward, because I might imagine we can't get to everything today.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. I said this, I believe, before you joined the call. I think this is going to be one of many working group calls, specifically working group call for the governance. So I don't imagine we can fix governance in 1 hour and stuff, right? But like, I think it's a good, like, healthy start. You know, we have a lot of healthy members from the community coming together right now, and we can go over them item by item. And if there's any next step, we can schedule it. Like, I'm happy to schedule a future governance call, maybe 2 weeks from now, so we can revisit it. So it can be like every 2 weeks we have a working group call. And if we have future proposals, future CVPs, they can be part of a separate governance call that is not the working group. And maybe we can test out our assumption, what we're doing this working group by, for any new CVPs, we can see, you know, is it following the new process that we're outlining well, or maybe it's something, I guess what I'm trying to say, maybe it'll be a good, interesting feedback kind of cycle as well.
Beautiful. Sorry for joining late.
No worries. No worries. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy paste this item. I'm going to put them in this doc. And then once we have a final doc, I'm going to share the link here to this governance call agenda. And then that way it's always accessible if you go on GitHub. And, you know, we're always going to have that link available for everyone. Okay, so tensions. Alrighty. Oh, nice. Okay, so let's go over each tension. So governance in Cvp process, I think this is the biggest one, not as specified as the CIP process. We can go over Cosmos as an example. I hope you can still see the screen. Let's see. Yeah, so, you know, like this is like super well written and stuff. It goes over like in a well documented manner. What does the proposal process look like, and what's the governance mechanism? I believe some of that stuff we captured it in the docs, but having it like more like specified in a step-by-step process, so that anyone who's an outsider entering the Celo community is able to be like, okay, this is what I can expect in governance. Here's the toolings available to me to submit a proposal. And this is what I can, these sort of potentially the governable parameters I can propose, or if it's not related to parameters, I can't propose. So let's talk about this more. I think I talked to Amy early on when I joined about if maybe we can do a grant or something for somebody to work on like a new proposal, new documentation. I believe I spoke to somebody from Figment, but they didn't have enough time to submit a grant request for this. but yeah, could be a good opportunity for anyone here. If they have a grant proposal for, improving, just documenting it in a better way, or maybe part of a Gitcoin bounty, it could be like an avenue for that kind of thing. But the whole tension here is, and if you go over the initial like tension here, and like if you look at CGP with missing a section, yeah, I'm just gonna move that here because I think it kind of relates to that. One of the main issue was that we submitted some CGPs with like section that had to be discussed later, but we submitted that on chain, and that's like less than ideal if we want to really take governance seriously as a community and stuff. So yeah, I want to leave this tension to open it up to the floor and see what do y'all think. Let's talk about Cosmos as an example. It doesn't have to be the only example. If you have any other example that you've seen in work in the past and stuff like that, we can definitely talk about them. The other thing I want to put in mind is CIP 00. Yeah, so this is the CIP process itself. Is super well documented. It shows you all the different categories of CIPs that you can submit. What are it's the standard meta informational, what's the workflow, shepherding, ring 01, the CIP process itself, how to all the statuses. It's really well detailed. I'm not going to go over this for the call, but I'm going to keep it as an example here of other things that we can look to for inspiration, if you will. So with that, yeah, I want to hear what everyone thinks and stuff. Okay, so I need to look at my chat window.
One thought that I had about the relation between how things are currently organized for Celo and how Cosmos is doing it. They have, in Celo, there's the different rings of proposals, right? Ring 0, ring 1, and they have, they inform people, what level of the Celo protocol this proposal is really impacting. And then on Cosmos, we see that they're more descriptive, right? So we have, perhaps a parameter change or a text update. It feels like these could map to each other very well, where, for instance, every time you have a parameter change, it's implicitly a ring 1 or whatnot, or every time you just have a text or a general recommendation, that's implicitly a ring 3. And so it feels like there's a way to preserve the ring structure that is already a part of Celo and perhaps map this with it in a way that's kind of more descriptive and productive, and kind of builds upon what's already in place.
Yeah, I really I guess strongly agree that I think a lot of, not a lot of the problem, but I think it's really important, and I think, Mike, this is kind of what you were touching on, is that we kind of define the relationship between CIPs and CGPs. I think a lot of people kind of conflate the two ideas, when in reality, CIPs and CGPs are possibly a Venn diagram with some level of overlap, right? A CIP to change the way. Okay, for example, we've talked about I guess optimistically aggregating BLS signatures and consensus, right? Rather than verify every single BLS signature, why don't we just wait until we collect 67 or 2F+1 and then verify the aggregate signature, assuming that it will verify. And then if it goes wrong, we can deal with that. And that's a performance optimization. That's a CIP, doesn't touch the on-chain governance process at all, right? You don't need to submit a transaction. We're talking about a kind of a change click strictly in the client code. Similarly, you might have a CIP, and that's ring 0, right? Similarly, you might have a CIP that talks about kind of a new standard for how to take CIP8, for example, that talks about standards for storing off-chain data, right? Not a CGP, because you don't need to submit a transaction through the governance contract for it. And it's a much higher ring CIP, right? It's arguably I've at times argued that it's a CRC, right? But you could imagine, CRCX, right, for new token standard Y. You may also have CIPs that require CGPs. So you can imagine a change to the way kind of transaction fees can be paid that would also require like updating some like the Celo dollar smart contract, right? Because we have kind of these interactions between like the Celo blockchain binary and kind of the like chain state. And so that's kind of at like the middle of the Venn diagram where it is both a CIP. It cannot be captured entirely in a CIP or a CGP, right? And the CGP is like kind of like a subset of like all the things that need to happen to put the CIP to like adopt the CIP. And then finally, you have like pure CGPs, right? Like let's transfer, 10,000 Celo dollars out of the governance contract to like this person because they're gonna build this thing, right? Or like, hey, let's tweak a parameter in the way kind of staking rewards are paid out, and that's just like an on-chain proposal. And so my feeling is that like one of the areas that we need to start, in addition to like further specifying the CGP process, right? And like, okay, here's what a well-written CGP should look like. Here's who you should look to approval from this person that like your write-up kind of captures everything that's needed. You should make the proposal on a Tuesday. You should like circulate it on these channels beforehand, so on and so forth. In addition to that, I think we probably need more detail on like where the lines exist between these two processes, and like a way kind of like define the interface between the two of them, because I think that's unclear to a lot of people, arguably also myself, and certainly it is not captured in like the documentation we have. And I see that, Mike, as kind of relating to like the tension that you brought up.
Yeah, it was also like me personally, kind of confusing, when I entered Celo, like, the CGP versus CIP. And one of the things James Presswich and I were trying to do was trying to, how do we make, align them within a CIP process and having governance at the same time. And yeah, so to go back to one of the points about implicitly tracking CGP parameters inside CIP, one of the ideas we had, but we haven't really pushed through with it, James and I, was if we can create one active CIP document, an active CIP document, or like an example of an active one, active status is the CIP process. By being active, it's a living, ongoing document that we can update and stuff. But it's active, that means it's not like a different specification like what we do with like hard forks and like Celo Euro as an example. But an active document is like active, like ongoing, that we can always update. So maybe one of the ideas we can do to track CGP parameters, like at least governable parameters, is having a CIP list of all the different parameters, governable parameters. And anytime a governable parameter is CGP is proposed, once it's like executed by governance, we would part of the work, task is to update that document, like that CIP document, with the new parameter change, as an idea. I'm happy to listen, hear any other idea, but this is something that, potentially can be a solution that can, at the very least, find that little working structure in that like Venn diagram overlap between the CIP and the CGP process, potentially. Okay. So the other thing about, what is, so it's talking about templates and example, here's what a CGP looks like. Actually, I believe I have a work in progress pull request. Oh yeah, so update preamble. Like one of the first steps I wanted to do is make a better preamble, which is like just the header of a template and what it would look like. And the this will be nice is if you see, for example, EIP dot. For example, if you look at the EIP page, like the whole website is open source. And if you have like a nicely formatted preamble, it can like display really nicely when, people are parsing and become more user-friendly for people to like, read about the different CGP and CIPs and stuff. So that's maybe one of like the things that we can do to update the preamble, update what like the template section we're looking for and stuff. And at the same time, update, or at least if not update, allocate a category like, Mike was talking about, like, like having a specific category for each CGP would make a lot of sense and stuff. Any other thoughts on this? Okay, so how about this as like an initial first step for this tension, and we can, expand on like, different action items and stuff. We can, for this bit, we can create an action item. What would the new template look like, and what would the preamble look like? And as a first step before we can think about how to propose a CGP and stuff, maybe that would be a good action item. What do you all think? Okay, I'll take that as a
Can
yes.
I make a comment
Yeah.
from the very end of the spectrum when we look at this governance call, governance process attention? And so if I'm like putting myself into the general Celo community members' shoes or their perspective, and I guess in my opinion, as a general Celo community member, I would need to know really like process details, right? Whether that's put it in a template or in the better, documentation. It needs to be more accessible from the user experience perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we start looking at that problem as a whole, not as a let's just decide on, okay, we have the document we have is it's not easy to read, and a better example might be the Cosmos document. But instead, you're looking at the other crypto blockchain platforms, so their governance process, which I don't find it particularly great. If you have to, as a Celo community member, if you're forced to going into the GitHub and look at the document, the text documents, to just understand the Celo governance proposal or each proposal and then make a vote on it, I think we're looking at the problem a little bit differently than I had thought that this working group could work on, right? I think we could look at this problem really as a user problem, the Celo community member, the tension, because they want to participate in the how Celo platform and the community or the Celo platform prosper. And as a stakeholder of the Celo platform, they should be able to just easy to understand what the changes is going in and easy to vote. And so if we can just start from the very beginning, what are the North Star we want to get to? What is the world look like if we have the Celo new and old Celo community members joining the Celo platform? And if they're looking at the governance proposal or the process for the first time, and am I going to be able to understand easily and yep, this is exactly what's going to is the benefit the Celo platform? No, I don't think this will benefit my community. So therefore, I'm not going to vote on it, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's a good call out. I do believe it was captured down here. Yeah, try to make the CGP. But if you think this is something that we need to put as part of like what the template would look like, make sure that the language is clear for the Celo general community and stuff. I think that's a good call out and stuff. My only concern here is some of the proposals are technical in nature. Like there's no way around it, right? Like if there's a governable parameter that we need to change, it's a technical proposal, right? But maybe I guess what would be helpful when there is like those technical parameter changes, that we can have like a section that kind of explains it to the average user, like by modifying this parameter, this is what to expect in the behavior and stuff of the blockchain, etc. Hey, Amy, yeah, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest maybe a way to kind of group all of these thoughts that we've been, like Asa, Judy, and you have mentioned together, is that maybe like in this like header template redesign, we need to make it more explicit, like what level this change is impacting. And I don't know if like the ring approach is super accessible for like the average user to understand. So maybe just being much more explicit, like this is a much lower protocol level change. This is a change at the like a parameter change, and like having those more human readable descriptors in that header. And then I don't know if it would also fit here, but having some sort of like TLDR, what does this mean to like a non-technical user at the top as well? So like, how does this impact me? So if like an average user can come and say, okay, this is a lower protocol level change, I probably won't understand everything that's here, but maybe there's a short descriptor of how this could impact me as a Celo holder or as a dApp developer.
Yeah, that's great points. Yeah, go ahead.
An additional idea, I think, is that like fundamentally we face this problem, I think, in plenty of other places as well, where I think we have a very wide spectrum of users and various skills and contexts necessary to understand things. I think what has worked in the past, one time, I think for release 1, for example, Vanessa just made a like nice video that I think was much more accessible than I think the existing documentation at the time. And so I wonder if we can just have continuous grants that basically create more accessible documentation from the possibly more technical documentation for each proposal, so that it becomes more accessible.
Yeah. Before we, I just wanted, Ronan, you raised your hand. Want to talk?
Yeah, just building on Judy's point, which I think is a bit about target audience. I don't know if there's an explicit decision already made as to who the target audience should be for governance. I think right now, you know, in practice, we're talking about governments, we're talking about voting. Voting is probably pretty much validators, I assume, who are actually doing nearly all of the votes in this case. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I assume that they are the largest owners and the largest voters.
You're correct, and there's like the most of the liquidity and like, or like, you know, lockup is potentially with the validators. But for me, the target audience is anyone who owns Celo. Like if you're an owner of Celo, or like, you know, you have Celo in your portfolio, you're empowered to be you know, take part in the governance. Like one of the things I want to do, like, you know, internally at CLab is I want to show folks who haven't done governance before, how do you vote and stuff like that. So, you know, I don't know if anyone has any other different opinion, but I think the target audience would be Celo owners in general.
And when you say Celo owner, or because we're also using the term community, would that mean people who own like CUSD, Celo US dollars? Because I guess they wouldn't be able to vote technically.
Yeah,
so
but yeah, that's a good call out.
What is our
CUSD function as a stable coin, right? But
right, totally.
Celo, a native asset, is the governance to like it's used for governance essentially.
So who are we trying to target when we say community? Do we just mean Celo owners? I guess Celo owners, probably if you look at the numbers, are also going to be pretty much validators, with the exception of small amounts of Celo that are being given as rewards, say in Valora.
Yeah, so I think there's who we're targeting today and who do we want to target tomorrow as a number of options support, right? I mean, like in the sense where we're getting more user-friendly interfaces that allow voting. And hopefully the number of Celo owners is growing. So I think there's a more like, let's scratch our own itch for the current voters and let's make sure that that CGP process is smooth. And then there's like, how do we think of, Vanessa's been thinking a lot about how do we onboard new users and how do we get them to start being engaged and believing and like participating in the community. And that's maybe a lower touch approach today just because the impact is smaller, but it doesn't mean we should completely ignore them either.
Yeah, so the last thing I'll just add is I think this is good what we're doing to simplify and improve the governance process, but I think it's an equally, if not more important activity to think about how we engage people and get them very incentivized to be involved. And the lowest hanging fruit I see there is getting more validators on board, because to me, they're clearly the most incentivized to get involved in the voting, potentially also with people who are building on the Celo architecture.
So you had a hand raised.
Yeah, just to like add to this question or this conversation around audience, I think my feeling is that it will be like my suspicion is that it will like wind up being like an incremental process where like I guess if you think about kind of once again like rings of I guess closeness to the Celo project and like the kind of Celo technical details, like I think our goal should be to expand the reach of like I guess the diameter of the ring to which the governance process is friendly, right? And I think right now that is very narrow, right? It's like kind of cumbersome for like all of us, right? And like arguably like we're the closest to it. And I think once we like iron out those improvements for ourselves to the point, as kind of the closest ring where it's like, okay, like this is working really smoothly for us, it becomes a natural time to think about, okay, like now how can we make it easy and accessible for like a broader kind of broader group of people. And obviously like these efforts will go on in parallel to some degree anyways, and they should, but I think it's super ambitious, perhaps like too ambitious to think about how can we get to focus on, say, like your typical like Valora user engaging in governance before we've like ironed out like a smooth process for like folks that are like much closer and much more willing to like deal with like pains and quirks and stuff.
Shruti, you had a question? I don't know if you were done, Asa.
Yeah.
Yeah, Judy.
Yeah, it's, along the line, I think we need to continue to expand the engagement from the Celo community, because the Celo platform itself its mission is all about financial inclusion. And financial inclusion doesn't happen for the Celo community, by the Celo community, unless we make the even the governance process accessible to them as well. So I would like to propose that we make the governance process, when we make improvement, with the North Star setting such that any Celo Celo owner, whether you have one Celo or the two Celo, right? And they should be able to participate in the governance proposal. And if we set that as a North Star, and I think the type of solutions that we would propose and come up with and discuss, the direction will be very much different than if we just smaller scope, let's make an improvement to something look like, that works better in other platform, for example, or even smaller scope, let's make an improvement, less documentation, clearer, versus I think that could be the part of the solutions for the smaller set of a group, but it's not going to be the solution for the every Celo holder.
Yeah, I think that's a good call out. I think my main concern is the UI, like the UX that currently exists. It doesn't really cater to what we call like the seller owner who at least had one seller and stuff. Like I would like to see Valora or some other app, like, just from your phone being able to vote and stuff, and being able to cater to that. But I think that concern is more of a UX, like how do we improve the UX around vote, governance voting in order to allow even like the tiniest seller owner to be able to participate. Did I get that right? Is that where
Yeah,
you're
but
going?
if we don't talk about that, even the UX problem, if someone else actually has the governance improvement proposal and then get a community grant to make an improvement, they should be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I think this meeting we could propose possible suggestions and problem set, and what are the North Star that we're trying to achieve, and what are the the goal that we want to achieve. Then I think there are many wonderful ideas that could come from improving the UX to documentation to it doesn't have to be this group solve the problem, but it could come from the proposal, and the solutions come from the actual community themselves.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a good call out. I believe, I think Asa at the beginning, because he divided three classes of solution, documentation and process, and then toolings, like technical tooling. Potentially, those two can be scoped out within this working group as part of a solution for how do we improve UX for the average user and stuff. Because I think those 2 points kind of like overlap in catering not only to the most technically savvy, but also the one who had one seller owner, one seller as part of their portfolio. We're 3 minutes before time. I believe Daniel, go ahead, and then we need to talk about next steps after.
Oh, well, no, I just wanted to second Judy and Asa's comments, and also maybe try to bring in Ronan's as well. I'm fairly new to Celo, but I understand kind of the impetus for rolling out the governance at the very user level to make it as democratic as possible. But I also see from Ronan's perspective that you have to start somewhere with establishing your governance norms and procedures in order to kind of have continuity through the community. So maybe starting a process of rolling out governance in smaller groups, such as the validators, like Ronan is suggesting. And then when the processes are ironed out, then moving those kind of established processes down to the lower user level, to the person that has, one Celo in their wallet.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that, Daniel. Yeah, I think I captured it perfectly from Judy and Asa and Ronan's point. Starting somewhere and then, expanding it, but still keeping the average user within the scope. Like if one person owns one seller, they definitely need to be considered as part of the governance process. Unfortunately, we're 2 minutes till time, and I want to respect everyone's time here. I believe we have captured, at least I think this is the most important point, because this is where we want to see all the improvements happening and stuff, and we can kickstart it. I want to go over what are potential action items and when can we schedule the next working group. Is everyone comfortable 2 weeks from now, or do you think this is something that we can do every week? I'm flexible, but like I just want to make sure that this is something that respects everyone's time. A normal cadence of every 2 weeks, that way it gives everyone like potential homework or things to think about as a community before the next meeting, is a good cadence. So is 2 weeks from now a good time to revisit the next working group call? Do I get a thumbs up maybe?
Yeah, I like 2 weeks. I think I am going to try to take a stab at least submitting a PR with some like process suggestions or changes. But I'm reluctant to like commit to getting that out super soon, because I feel like these things always, like life comes at you fast, and it's easy to feel like very optimistic about getting something out, and then like, you know, other things come up. So yeah, I would love to, at least homework for me, like try to take a stab at that in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully we can like have some conversations about it asynchronously. And then we can use, like, one thing we could use the next meeting on is to like discuss kind of whatever questions or decisions we need to make that we weren't able to address asynchronously with respect to that.
Okay. Are you going to be taking a stab at the process or more like the template and stuff? Because I can help, because I have ideas for the template, and you know, I have a lot of good points from everyone here just about the template and categories of like what a CGP template. And do you want to take a stab at the process itself potentially?
I was thinking kind of like all of this, like all of the things that we can do with respect to like documentation and process that like don't require writing code, that would like help make this smoother with kind of the tooling and like smart contracts and stuff we have already. I would love to like work with you on that, and we can like maybe talk outside of this call about like how we want to like carve that up.
All right, cool. So I'm going to make it an action item for both of us. Is, next call. Okay. So if
But that's not including the governance for this group, right? Because I would also still like to talk about what is the ultimate purpose of this group, the working group, and how we're going to continue to meet. Because I see that this document, which is great, it's a wonderful start, but I think a working group could also either temporarily, until we achieve the goal for this working group, could set the purpose.
I think the purpose is defining what a more specified and improved governance proposal process looks like that is inclusive of everyone. Looks like. I think that's the initial goal and stuff. If I don't capture that right in words and stuff, I'm more than happy to work with you, Judy, on finding the right description for this working group so we can better market it for the future call if that is helpful for you.
Yeah, that would be great. I think if we put the purpose up front, and we could even share with more open and transparently with the outside of this group as well, and then they can also follow along the discussion.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Okay, so I guess then I'm just gonna do an action item here. Yes, and Judy.
It's like meta governance, right? Like
yeah,
we're going to govern how governance should be made better.
Meta governance. All right, so this is, you and I, Judy, will talk offline about this. So because we're at time, if anyone feels there's anything here they wanna like take as an action item, just add it here. I'm gonna collect this, the notes we have here. I'm gonna add them to the original GitHub agenda ticket here. I'm gonna post the video at this ticket as well, and I'm gonna, and then we're gonna create a new agenda item for next week, for 2 weeks from now and stuff like that. Does that sound good for everyone? Any other final comments and stuff? All right, cool.
Is there a good place, Yaz, to post any follow-up remarks?
I beg your pardon, sorry.
Is there a good place to make any follow-up contributions or remarks? Like in writing?
Yeah, I mean, like the document here, I'm gonna link it to the original agenda so you can make follow-up contribution if you need. Yeah, the document itself. I'm just gonna add it here, comment. So it's available on the agenda item and stuff. So, and yeah, we can take it as, you know, you can follow up asynchronously on that document, if that's cool. Let's see. All right, so with that, I wanna thank everyone for what I think is a good first step for initial call for this working group to define what Governance 2.0 looks like and how do we make it more inclusive for the community and stuff like that. So I want to thank you. And with that, I'm going to stop recording right now. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much, Yaz.
Thanks, Yaz.
Yes.
Everyone, bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Yaz.